You're tuned in to the MtG Cable cast, where they cover Magic, the Gathering finance. All right? You don't know about it? You're tuned in right now and get ready to learn some shit. Buckle your seatbelts and light a blunt and get ready for the MtG Cable cast. Starring Reptar and Thirsty, them onion head motherfuckers.
Alrighty guys, welcome to the newest episode of the Cabal Cast, and this week we're actually going over some changes that we're making here in the podcast. We've got three big things that are basically going to change how we're delivering content to you guys and how we're staying engaged. So with that, let's take it away and go over them.
So the biggest one is that we are going to be dropping from an episode every week to effectively 2 episodes a month, once every other week, just to kind of make sure that we keep things interesting, keep things fresh. And in those 2 episodes, we will be only doing picks for one of them. Meanwhile, we will continue to be putting our picks up inside the podcast Discord. So that will be not just for both episodes, but through the several channels that we utilize for pick, speculation, and conversation, we will continue to be putting information into those avenues.
Yep. Yeah, and that's something that basically, look, we've said it on the podcast before, it's been kind of hard recently because things have kind of trended back towards that collector market. So we've been having problems with topics, frankly. So we're trying to be a little bit more fluid here and being able to adapt to things as stories emerge, because especially over the last, probably 2 months, it seems like every week there's been some big announcement that's merited its own episode and changed things for us. So just trying to make it better for you guys.
Yep, absolutely. This year has been, even a little bit last year, kind of a struggle. There's a lot to basically rehash, and that's about it. The change in the tenor and tempo with which large events happen, and the reduction in that has also impacted not just finance, but what kind of goes on in Magic that is newsworthy. And a lot of it comes from announcements, because organized play is kind of just floating along right now. Yep. So there's no reason to be reactionary. We can take our time. We can dig in on things. And generally speaking, when those announcements come, like you mentioned, we'd like to put those episodes off for a couple of weeks so we can wait, we can read, and we can basically pull apart everything that we need to talk from a position of knowledge or a position of power.
Yeah.
And so instead of being reactionary, we want to be forthcoming. We want to be knowledgeable. And that
exactly.
This change will allow us to do that. The next change that we're going to be making is in line with this. For every set, we do 2 episodes. We do our set preview, effectively, what we've been seeing people talk about, what we effectively refer to as our hype episode, and then we do a look back for the previous set. Yep. We will continue to be doing those, but in an effort to make the Patreon bonuses more interesting, we're going to make the hype review episodes Patreon only. And that might also mean including our notes for that into Patreon as well. We haven't talked about that, but it's something we could be doing. Yep. Those will basically be a bonus episode every 7 to 8 weeks that goes up to Patreon to kind of keep things relevant, keep things interesting. And it also kind of helps unmuddy the waters, because there's a lot that goes on at every set review, and there's a lot to talk about. And looking back is one of the more important things necessarily than looking forwards when it comes to a podcast episode, because the timing on that is oftentimes very relevant. And having conversations in text, in Discord or Twitter or Blue Sky, what have you, is a lot more useful and a lot more relevant than listening to a podcast episode that comes out basically the Monday of set release, because things have already moved. So for all of our listeners, it's kind of a disservice in that regard. And this is going to dovetail into the next change. If you don't mind, I'll just run right into that.
Yeah, go for it.
So we'll be making an update to Patreon, and we'll be dropping it from 3 tiers, $1, $3, and $5, down to 2 tiers, free and $1. And with the free tier comes access to our Discord, all the conversation that goes on in there, all the channels that we toggle on and off depending on where events are, because we do have AMA channels in there and things like that. Yep. And then the $1 tier will get access to the Patreon-only podcast episodes that go up. So we will be putting the Hyper-V episodes up on Patreon, and they will basically just be behind the $1 per episode, I believe, charge that we do for that. And that is basically the updates that we will be making to the MTG Cabalcast for the year 2025. A lot of it has to do with the first object of this, which is just making sure that we can deliver content at a schedule that works for everyone.
Yep.
About topics that matter.
Yeah. And I mean, realistically, how many times it's almost seemed like we've had a rote, all right, this is our rhythm for every single set. It's going to be the same thing every time. And that's not what we necessarily want to do. We want to be able to react to those important things and leave that content there for people who choose to engage with it.
Yeah. And, as much as we would like to pontificate about the reserve list for a year or kvetch about secret layer and random supplemental that comes out, recap some of the events that we go to, we do understand, and we have, heard through attrition that basically things need to be a little more interesting, a little more thoughtful, and that's perfectly fine. Everybody's kind of in that same spot, and to extract any kind of value from this, we need to change our value prop. And this goes hand in hand with the episode last week where we went and we reviewed our specs. We held ourselves accountable, and this is something that we've been talking about behind the scenes for a couple months now, which is just independently, we both thought that, we need to do more for the podcast. We need to do more for the people that listen. And this is the best way we can serve that, is to reduce the number of episodes that come out in favor of focusing on community in the Discord and continue to doing things in there in a more engaging and interesting fashion.
Yeah, for sure.
That's basically going to be it come 2025.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is we're going to finish our year out the way we always have, but come January, that is when the change will be effective. So that's when we'll put everything in place.
Yep, and we haven't really decided yet if it'll be an every other week cadence, because not every month has an even number of weeks.
Yep.
And we still have to do our set-related episodes, so that does mean we are tied into episodes at certain times, so we might do back-to-back weeks of episodes. We haven't sat down to schedule out the next year, but rest assured, we'll be here 2 episodes a month.
Sure will.
All right, so this is going to be a quick episode, so we can just run right into picks.
Yes, let's do it. I'm starting because I think mine's cool.
It is.
So something very interesting happened in the store over the holidays, basically. So we sold out of standard product. We even sold out of foundations. And now I will say we were running a promotion with foundations, and it was frankly one that was kind of designed to move foundations because we didn't think it would be that great. Yeah. And that's basically, we save our old box topper packs for promotions. So if there's a box topper and we do a draft, we keep it unopened and we'll blow it out for Black Friday. Oh. So we had Modern Masters box toppers and Ultimate Masters box toppers.
So for people that don't know, box toppers used to come in 2 different fashions depending on the set. One is external to the box. It was an additional pack or card given out to the person at purchase. The other was inside the box given out to the person that opens it. So there's a little bit of a rub. If you're a vendor and you are opening boxes, you're just getting box topper packs. Then you just have a bunch of these things lying around. If you're an LGS and they're in the boxes and you have the packs, well, now it's kind of a what do we do with this thing?
Yeah.
Right.
So that's what we did. But the interesting thing about this is the first time that we've had obviously competitive demand for standard, and they didn't have to up the prize support. So as much as I wanted to poo-poo on them for being absolutely terrible, I guess people are so desperate for competitive standard that it actually worked. Mm-hmm. And what's happened now is we've had a sudden rush on our standard content, and frankly, that's something I didn't expect. But you know what's going to happen? Come January, I know my distro is going to have a New Year sale. You better believe I'm going to stock up on standard at that point. Mm-hmm. And, this is something that we hadn't necessarily planned for. Obviously, there's not big events. We have price support for the week through Christmas. We're also kind of fortunate because we are in town with 2 distros with warehouses here where I can literally drive and pick it up after a phone call. Okay. So we can afford to order a little bit tighter because we do have that luxury that not every store has. Yeah. But I basically wanted to put this out there as, hey, if you're a shop, this is something that you may want to keep an eye out for. You may want to see if there's some local store that, hey, sent all their supply back, that they got at a discount because they couldn't sell it, and now all of a sudden here's a flash sale on foundations or Murders at Karlov or whatever the case may be. All of a sudden now, hey, we need to do this, and sure, it's the end of the year, but while we have all this money from the holiday sales, let's try to get flush again. And I think that's something that shops should keep an eye out for sure.
I think it also is important for people who want to work at the LGS in regards to trades and acquisitions. You got to pay attention to standard. It is very relevant now. We're getting to a point now where the data on MTG Top 8, for instance, is about the last 3 weeks is about where you want to start looking. So when you start formulating, okay, what product do I want? Do I want to be buying sealed? Do I want to be like buying from individuals? What do I need to target? The standard metagame is very clear as of the last 3 weeks. It's basically taken shape, and it's going to ride this way into the new year. January 3rd is going to be Star City Atlanta, and my gut feeling is that the way that the Star City has built their schedule, the way that NRG is trying to start their own little like Great Lakes area tournament series, they're going to be the shape of standard. And we're going to be kind of back in the like early to mid 2000s Grand Prix hype cycle of Grand Prix happens. The best decks are the ones that everybody are going to try and copy and next level. You have about a month to ride that wave to the next Grand Prix and kind of move from there. So as a backpacker or a store that wants to reprice based on events, I think this is going to be the cycle that we're going to get back into. We're not going to have Grand Prix every weekend like we used to. They'll be spread out a little more, and we have these heuristics in front of us that we can lean on to kind of figure out what we want to do as individuals. As an LGS, do you feel good that you are more, I don't want to say in tune with, but more reliant on standard?
Yeah. I don't know if more reliant is necessarily the right phrase, but it is nice that this is the first time that we've had a product or a venue of Magic where we felt like, oh my God, this is actually something that could matter, and going forward. And I think that feels good. Regardless of what product it is, the feeling is just good to have about Magic in general, because we haven't had that with Magic at the LGS in over a year. You know, people were excited for their individual singles out of whatever set, but they weren't excited to actually come in and necessarily open the product outside of a, Modern Horizons set or something like that.
Got it. Okay.
And it's been very nice to see, and not something that I expected whatsoever to happen.
Yeah, and it's nice to be there again, I guess.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about standard decks costing infinite money unless people have to buy into Screaming Nemesis. Everything's pretty cheap right now.
Yeah.
So you don't have the fetch land Jason Prodigy problem yet, but we are in a place where people care about standard again. Fantastic.
Yeah, and it's actually kind of floated over to our limited events. We've had more demand for standard sets there as well, so that's something else to think of heading into the new year is, hey, do we want to have more limited events, because that's a way that players can accessibly get their standard cards as well.
Yeah, okay. Interesting, and that might impact RCQs as well if you want to handle both in standard format when you have the opportunity to, or mix both. All right, that's cool. It's nice to see that again, and it's nice to see that it's spread across all of standard, not just a couple of sets, because for the most part, cards in, I'd say everything from after Outlaws has standard relevant cards in them. There are some,
I'd say so.
Like the standard relevant cards from Outlaws just seems to be the reprint lands and then some uncommons. I don't think there's a whole lot of rare and mythic stuff coming out of Outlaws yet that's impacting standard. A lot of it comes from Murders and Bloomburrow and Duskmorn. So that'll be interesting to see. For me, I'm moving back into Commander, my little happy space for picks, and we are looking at Goldspan Dragon again, finally. This is a card that was originally released in Kaldheim, and that's the version we're looking at. It costs 3 and 2 red for a 4/4 dragon with flying and haste. It says whenever Goldspan Dragon attacks or becomes the target of a spell or ability, create a treasure token. Notably, it can be the target of a spell or ability you control, so equipping it triggers it. And then it also says treasures you control have tap, sacrifice this artifact, add 2 mana of any one color. So this is kind of like a treasure mana flare. Cool. Yeah. I added this to my list a little over a year ago, October 12th, 2023. CK was buying 5 from Kaldheim at $7.75. They had 17 retail at $8. TCG had 233 listings for $11.12. When I was taking my notes this week, CK was buying 31 from Kaldheim at $6. They're currently buying 0 from Kaldheim at $0. And they were selling 8 at 13, now selling 8 at 12. So what we're kind of seeing, well, not kind of, we saw just an absolute tank in this card. Even the Sox graph shows that it just plummets down to nothing, rises back up, and then just disappears again. And the reason for that is because everybody wanted this card. It was standard playable, commander playable. It was an all-star. And then it just got a bunch of reprints in a row. It was in Jumpstart 2022. It was a Secret Lair card, and it got a Modern Horizons 3 commander printing and a printing on the list. So things were kind of stymied, and that's why we're just see this data kind of fall off. And I'll talk more about that when we get to the actual timeline section. When we look at this card in Commander, it basically does one of two things. It plays inside the Dragons deck, or it plays inside Treasure Synergies, and those can be one circle. You know, this is a Venn diagram where it could just be one circle. Kindred Dragon is the most popular Kindred theme, according to Rec. And, quote, treasure decks are the second most popular deck tag on Rec, which used to be, I think, called themes. Yeah, so the overwhelming majority of people playing or submitting decks to Rec, it seems like, are playing this card, playing these themes, and the overwhelming majority of dragon decks and treasure decks also play red. So this is why we're seeing that kind of singular circle.
Yep.
This card serves both of these groups, and it serves them in similar fashions. So cool. This is a ramp spell in disguise as a creature. As we see, it's mana flare on a creature. It kind of promotes the creation of treasures to take advantage of the pseudo mana flare effect stapled on, because why would you play this card without a way to make treasures? It seems a little silly. That's kind of the power of this card, is to be making treasures and sacking them for 2 instead of 1. But the primary divergence between our two main player groups is what you'll be doing with either the treasures themselves as objects or the mana the treasures make. Technically, both decks get to take advantage of cards like Hellkite Tyrant, which is a card or dragon, rather, that says you win the game. That clause is stapled on, and that can allow both the Dragons deck and the Treasures deck to win easily, because Hellkite Tyrant counts the number of artifacts you control in your upkeep. So when you just have a bunch of treasures as objects, cool, and it's a dragon, also cool, right? But from there, the path kind of diverges from these two play groups. The treasures decks focus on the creation of treasures for a number of reasons, though most have to do with a critical mass of artifacts and mana for value, whereas dragon decks are reliant on treasures for mana to start dropping threats ahead of curve. So similar but different. We look at the treasure themes and we see combo decks like Prosper Tomebound and Korvold Fey Curse King. These are pretty easy examples of combo decks to find. Combo decks that utilize the aspect of quick and mash treasure generation to kind of do their thing. And then we see things like Mr. House President and CEO as a value commander that's looking to pay for its activated ability with treasures. And for those that don't know, Mr. House and President, the activated ability says 4 and tap, roll a 6-sided die plus an additional 6-sided die for each mana from treasures you spent to activate this ability. End of ability. Pay mana, roll dice. That's what the activated ability does. It does play into the passive, but this is the kind of thing we're looking to do here. This is what a lot of these players want to do. So some people want to jumpstart mana production with a personal mana flare and easy to sacrifice permanent thing, just kind of jump-starting a loop. And other players just want to roll a bunch of fucking dice. These are our divergent paths. And honestly, that's Commander, folks. This card appeals to a wide variety or a wide group of players. It's not overly aggressive in any aspect, and it can play a pivotal role in accelerating a player towards a win in any number of ways. And it's really hard to kind of dig in on this card because treasures are they're not unique. They're ubiquitous, and they just do a lot of the same things. It's just the gap between the ends here, what people are trying to do. Win the game with a combo, roll a bunch of dice. Like,
yep.
Cool.
Pretty disparate for sure.
Yeah. Like, it's hard. You can spend a lot of time talking about Magda, the mono red one, where you for every dwarf that gets tapped, you make a treasure, and then the activated ability of sack a bunch of treasures, go get a dragon. So you look at Magda and you're like, cool, this must be a combo deck where you put a bunch of dragons into play. And you would be wrong. It's tribal dwarves. What?
Yeah. I've always thought that this card was like verge of breaking out. I remember when it was insane in standard, and it was just all day, every day, you would buy every one you could get because it would sell immediately. And I thought, man, if people think this card is good as in standard, this should be utterly insane in EDH. And it just never took off the way I thought it was going to.
It also, well, okay, to be fair, the reason it didn't take off like you thought it was because when it released, it was from Midnight Hunt until, AFR until Crimson Vow. It was an over $40 card.
Fair, yeah.
When you look at, like, it goes vertical at AFR, just straight vertical. And my guess is because of the Ancient Copper Dragon shenanigans stuff, like all that treasure hoo-ha, right? And then it stays at 40 for like 6 months. That's most likely why it didn't come out. Or it was also $20 at release too. So it goes from 20 to 40, and it's just priced well out of the range of most people who are playing like dragons.
Yeah.
As a theme, because you're like, man, that's a lot just to make some treasures, but now it's a lot more accessible, and that's kind of why we're talking about it. So, one good point, and thank you for the lead-in on that one.
Yeah.
When I was taking my notes for the timeline section of this, and there were 267 listings, we're now down to 265. There were 6 pages of results, 641 total copies of this card left on the market. Going through each page. On page 1, there were 14 near-mint copies at $7.50 at the low. And that's basically where we are right now. Then the Gaming Co. Direct had 42 copies near-mint at $7.49. And another company had 74 near-mint copies at $7.62. And for those keeping track at home, that's 116. That's 130 copies of the 640 that were there. That is like a fifth. 20% of the copies of this card just on page 1 across those 3 vendors. Normal amount of copies on pages 2 and 3. On pages 4, a company has 16 near mint at $7.30 plus $5 shipping. Next is 28 copies at $12.60, then 12 copies at $13.03. That's on page 4. Page 5, 74 near mint copies at $15. And then page 6, a company that we mentioned a couple times, and probably will in the future, Last Save Point, has 9 near-mint copies at $33.67 and 12 LP copies at $33.38, or 68 cents, sorry. And that's kind of the price trajectory of this card, which is it starts out at $7.50, takes a little while, and then it's a $12 card. It almost doubles. Yeah. But it's going to take some time. So we know stock is deep, and we know we have a number of anchors across each page of listings, but breaking through the wall on the first page is tantamount to the long-term price growth of this card. The Black Friday kickback looks to have doubled sales for that period of time, but when we look at the days coming out of that, sales slow to about 5 copies a day. If that is the true number, then we're looking at about a month and a half to break through the first page of prices and start seeing decent returns on copies we buy now at $7.40 for the near mint low. The current market price in this card isn't really representative when you're looking at the TCG Player market and what's on stocks, and seems to be lagging a little bit because there are really no sales at the $6 and change level, not even factoring in shipping to get up to $7. They are raw $7.40 right now, so the market is a bit of a lie. Like I said, it moves from 7 to 8 once we break through the wall of 130 copies, and it hovers around 750 at that anchor point, and after that, there's no coming back in price. So if we buy in now, we need to list our copies at around 850 to see profit, and I'd like to see them move closer to 10 before we list up there before we really start relisting in bulk. But that's going to be about almost 300 units to sell through, which is probably about 3 months out if velocity holds. So this is actually going to be kind of a short to midterm hold if you want to move in decent quantity and you want to make like $3 profit on each one of these. Now this is a note from last week. This is not of this morning. Buy list prices were rising. And I said I'm uncertain if we'll see them crest past $8, but I'd keep an eye on them as we head towards that 3-month mark. Now, CK is buying every version of this card except the call time non-foil. So we just lost on that one on CK, but that was never the out I was going to look for, and I wouldn't be surprised if that never comes back. Right now, of the non-foils they're buying the mystery booster list version at $750, which is market price for call time, and they're buying the secret layer non-foil for like $12. For reference, the list reprint, the near mint low, is $7.50. So CK is almost paying market on non-secret layer non-foil versions of these cards. So there is opportunity, but I don't think it's going to be here for a while. I don't know if the CK customer profile really supports this card. When we come and let me take a look at reprint equity, I mentioned up top, we saw a reprint in Jumpstart 22 and Modern Horizons Commander 3 in the decks themselves. And those are the most relevant reprints outside of the secret layer it was in. And that was just a printed demand secret layer. I don't remember what else was in it, but that was like the highlight card of the secret layer. So I don't think we'll be seeing this come back through standard at all. And because this makes untapped treasures and gives treasures the ability to sack for 2 mana instead of 1, this seems a bit too pushed to keep getting reprints. This isn't dockside, but it does get out of hand rather quickly. It also doesn't follow what seems to be the current design pattern of making tapped treasures. And those are fairly important boxes to check. We spent all of Dominaria and Phyrexia All Will Be One making those tapped mono rocks that did nothing. All those cards flopped because they come into play tapped. Yeah. A lot of stuff makes tapped treasures now in red. That's kind of where we are. And those boxes seem to be important to check off for the health of the standard format and other things to fall out. And it's because this card doesn't do that. It seems like it's too powerful. It does too much to come back through standard right now. Or maybe in the future. So I really don't think we're going to be seeing a lot of meaningful reprints of this card. We might catch a couple here and there in commander decks, but they either have to be dragons or treasure related. And seems kind of weird to get a lot of that all the time. Now, when it comes to buy quantity, I have, I believe, 2 of these in commander decks. One of them is a dragon deck and one of them is a treasure deck. So there's that. But I'd be honestly happy owning upwards of a dozen of these, as I think it's going to be an easy churn. It's just going to be that 3-month hold. I don't think you can really go wrong with 12. And I also don't think this is the kind of card you're really going to be able to move locally. 12 is a nice number for me on this because you can list 8. You'll be a face in the crowd. You're not going to stand out when you have all the anchors like I went over before, 74 copies, 40-some copies. You're going to be down there with like the 8s and 12s, which I don't really care about too much when I'm looking at this for anchors. But that allows you to put 4 in a binder and bring to the LGS, and maybe you can move 1 or 2 and trade for a tidy margin here and there. You don't need to
Yeah.
double up on them in trade. You can just move them for things that might move a little more. I'm pretty sure, for instance, the MH3 fetch lands cost a little more than a Goldspan Dragon right now, but in a couple of weeks, that might not be the case.
Yeah.
So that's why I would go a little heavier on this one than some of the other picks. I do understand doing that is parking basically $100, like mothballing it for 3 months. If you're okay doing that, I think this is one of the better picks to put that much money into right now. And that's where I am this week.
Yeah. No, I've also, you mentioned the like power level affecting the reprint equity. It reminds me kind of like Dragon Mage, and that it's not necessarily inherently feels bad or negative to play against, but it's so powerful that it can, and that makes them a little bit more hesitant to reprint the card.
Yeah.
So
I just brought Dragon Mage up because I'm sure nobody besides like you, me, and 4 other people know this card. It's 5 and double red for a 5/5 dragon with flying, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, each player discards their hand, then draws 7 cards. So it was this weird way to put Wheel of Fortune on a creature.
Yeah.
And in Scourge, it was a rare. It came back in a couple commander sets. It fiddle farted there for a while, and then it just real recently started getting reprints all the way into Foundation. Like they stopped reprinting this card for like 6-7 years. Like,
Yeah,
you're right. They just cut it loose. It just was doing either too much or not
enough, one or the other.
Yeah, for 7 mana. Yeah. So here I want. Oh, you know what? If it's in it's starter, jumpstart. It's at a game night. Okay, but yeah. And yeah, there's some other cards you can parallel to this too. I thought this was going to be the one that had like double strike, the 8/8 double strike from Scourge. I can't remember the name of that one.
That was Tyrant, I thought.
Yeah. There are a lot of dragons like this that are just like, maybe it's a little too much.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's a little too little for standard. So we'll find a place to kind of squeeze it in somewhere else. And yeah, that could exactly be where Goldspan Dragon is, where it's a little too much for standard because it makes untapped treasures the tap for 2. It's very difficult to interact with because you're just given 2 mana for free, effectively, or 1 mana if you let the Goldspan die. And so it creates this lingering and lasting impact on a game of standard in a format where it doesn't seem like they want to kind of make it about like a mid-range deck that wants to close out, like to play this card, because it's not a closer.
No, not at all.
Yeah, it's a 4/4 for 5. It doesn't close out. You could be playing the Demon Room. It makes a 6/6 for 4.
Yeah.
Like, there are just better cards overall than this to close out a game. This creates this weird, convoluted like game states. Or there's the opportunity to we didn't have improvise. We could do something else with the treasures, just tap them for something that was unnecessary and like kind of cumbersome to the game at this point, that made the card a little overbearing as well inside standard. So it just like it checks a lot of boxes for reasons to not include it, and I think those boxes are more plentiful than the reasons. Like the pro con list is a better way to phrase this. There are more cons for printing this card into standard than there are pros right now, especially with the change in design like we discussed. So kind of commander relegated. And so that's my pick.
Dig it.
All right. Anything else for this week?
Nope. Let's take it away.
So for it, at MtG Cabalcast on Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, YouTube, and Blue Sky. I am at Halt. I am Reptar. You are
At Damon_Thurston.
And we'll see you next week.